Here's the thing, being a CEO or a leader isn't just about setting the big vision. It's about being able to have tough conversations head on. Because the reality is the tough conversations that you're probably avoiding are likely the ones that are going to take your business to a next level and take you to the next level. Today, I'm gonna break down how to have these conversations like a true leader. And this video will be the roadmap that helps you step up, lead with integrity, and build a thriving business. So let's get into it. Let's start with why these conversations are a non-negotiable if you're really serious about growth. I always say that if you are a solopreneur, so you are the only person in your business, or if you run a small team of, let's say, 5 people, then you are your business. And guess what that means? That means that your business is capped at the level of personal development that you are willing to seek out, that you are willing to achieve. And those people who are really ready to take their business to the next level are the people who are ready to focus on their deficits and lean into the areas where they are most beneficial to the business. And for most of you watching that is going to be the position of CEO. Like, you're not building a business to give yourself the job of an analyst or a coordinator. No, you're running the show, you're responsible for growth, you're responsible for steering the ship. And this is really what makes entrepreneurship so difficult, is not just the fact that you have to deliver on, providing an excellent service or product for your customers, the fact that you have to have great customer service. It's all of the moving parts and all of the skills that you are required to develop in order to be able to pull the puppet strings on this show that is your business. Okay, so we know that we need to develop the right skills in order to be the CEO of our business and be the CEO of our life. But why is having difficult conversations such an important part of that? Ultimately, I think that not having clear communication and there being misalignment within your business really go hand in hand. And I'm just gonna give you guys one small example that I've talked about so much on this channel. In fact, I have a whole video dedicated to it, which I will link up above and down below in the description box. But let's talk about most people's first hire, which is a VA or a virtual assistant. This is a really key role in your business because, like I mentioned, it's gonna be a lot of people's first hires, but this is also a lot of people's first opportunities to steer the ship within their business when it's not just them on the boat, right? Like, the stakes are higher when it's not just you, when other people are involved. When I found out how many entrepreneurial friends and how many clients I had were hiring and firing VAs like it was nothing, I was absolutely shocked. Like, I literally couldn't believe it. Like, I'm not talking about once or twice, but there are people who had hired and fired more than a dozen people. And that is absolutely crazy to me. It's something that I'll never be able to wrap my head around. And here's the thing, yes, there are always going to be those people that they weren't a good fit for the business, right? Or maybe they were able to really sell their skills during the interview process, but they actually weren't able to deliver, which, side note, is one of the reasons why I talk about mastery so much, so that you never find yourself in that position where a client hires you and you're not able to deliver. That feels pretty ridiculous to me. But anyway, there's going to be a small fraction of the time where it's something along those lines, right? Either somebody doesn't actually have the skills required, or it's just not a good fit for whatever reason. Notice I said that's what happens a small percentage of the time. Like, that definitely should not be the norm. So these reasons could be along the lines of, you weren't actually ready to bring an external party into your business. Maybe you didn't have, processes or standard operating procedures that enabled them to effectively do the job. Maybe an entrepreneur just couldn't justify the price of the work that they were outsourcing with the cost that was required to do that work. Or maybe they thought they needed somebody to have a specific skill set, and then once they started, they realized, oh shoot, I actually need somebody to have this skill set that this person who I've hired doesn't necessarily have. These are all possibilities, right? Like, these are all things that may have happened. But again, I really truly believe that a big reason why this is happening is because people are not ready to take on the role of a leader and have tough conversations. Here's the thing, I just truly believe that in life, whether it's in business, whether it's in your personal life, it is not fair to measure somebody to a standard that has never been communicated to them. And we often go through life doing this, right? We go through life having a certain expectation or a certain standard for friends, for coworkers, for people in business that has never actually been communicated. It's unspoken. But the reality is that's not truly fair. If you find yourself disappointed in the things that somebody says or the way that they act, you should feel comfortable enough to have a difficult conversation in order to give this person the opportunity to self-correct. And I feel like it sounds like common sense, but honestly, I kind of feel like socially we are in this era of hyper selfishness and almost like using a lot of therapy speak in order to justify why we don't have to do labor in order to achieve better outcomes between, us and other people and in general our relationships. It's a very strange place that we're finding ourselves in socially, in my opinion. And I can tell you that absolutely goes out the window when you are an entrepreneur and you are trying to achieve better outcomes for your business. Because here's the thing that nobody ever says, which is that ultimately nobody cares about your business the way you do. Nobody cares about the outcomes the way you do, especially if you are considering somebody who, you hired to operate in the business, whether it's a contractor, whether it's an employee. This is just another job for them. This is just another gig for them. And yes, while you would expect that people show up willing to do their best every day, it doesn't change the fact that ultimately this is not their business. So they're going to show up, they're going to do their best, they're going to do their job. However, the outcome of all of that still rests on your shoulders. Like the ramifications of them doing their job or not doing their job is still your problem. So as somebody who is the leader, as somebody who is the CEO, it is your job in order to have clear communication, which a lot of the time involves having difficult conversations in order to set clear expectations. Like I said, it's not fair to measure somebody to a standard that was never communicated to them. It's your job in order to have these difficult conversations in order to build trust so that there's buy-in and people do care about the output of their work. And it's your job to have these difficult conversations in order to continue building your business. And as a leader, as somebody who's a CEO, how you show up in these moments literally defines you. It defines the culture of the organization, and it can make or break your business. Because here's the thing, with a lot of small businesses, oftentimes you are not bringing somebody into your business until you have to, right? A lot of people are at their complete breaking point before they bring somebody into their business. Meaning when somebody is there, you need things to run like a well-oiled machine. Like you literally don't have the capacity, you don't have the time, you don't have the energy in order for things to fall apart and break again. So let's talk about 3 leadership mindset shifts that are required in order to have difficult conversations. The first is curiosity over assumptions. Here's the thing. A lot of the times when you're having a difficult conversation, it's because something has gone wrong, right? Like you likely don't want to address this issue, but you have to address this issue in order to fix things. But do not walk into that conversation with guns blazing. You actually want to walk into the conversation probing and asking questions in order to get more clarity. Don't just make a bunch of assumptions. If a customer has complained about something, don't just take that and run with it and make a bunch of assumptions about it. Sometimes what one person might have experienced isn't the totality or the full reality of a situation. So you need to shift your mindset of you are walking into the situation, not to just fix things and resolve things, but to understand what even happened. So make sure that before you react, you have all of the facts. And another mindset shift that's really important is empathy over ego. Here's the thing. You have to remember that you are human too. You have likely made a mistake before. You have worked a job where you've made some sort of error. You've made mistakes in your business, running your business. So you have to have that perspective of ultimately you've done this before too, right? It might not have been to the same magnitude. It might not have had such a detrimental impact on yourself, but you are human and you've made a mistake. So remove your ego from this situation. Instead, make sure that you are approaching the discussion with empathy. And another reason why that's really important is because you want to be able to facilitate an environment where somebody does feel comfortable being open and honest. And if you are coming there assuming that you know all of the facts, with your ego sky high, do you think somebody who is feeling vulnerable is going to open up to you? No, it's not going to create the best environment for transparency and for honesty. So let's talk about actually preparing for the conversation. And the reason why that's important is because just because you are expected to have tough conversations doesn't make it easy, right? So you want to walk into it as prepared as possible. And how you're really going to do that is getting clear on your outcome. What is the purpose of the conversation? Again, there should be an aspect of understanding, that curiosity element, where you're looking to understand the situation holistically, but you're also looking to likely rectify the problem or address an issue. So what is your goal with the conversation, right? The other thing is to anticipate some sort of reaction. Most people don't respond well when their back is up against the wall, when they're being challenged, or if they're feeling called out. You know, this can put somebody in a position where they're feeling vulnerable, so their best self might not be at the forefront and center of all of this. So one of the ways that I like to help deal with anticipating a reaction in a tough conversation is actually to leave space in the conversation. And a lot of people don't do that, right? A lot of people, when they have tough conversations, it's just a whole lot of talking, a whole lot of asking questions. But if you can actually create these pockets within the conversation of, you know, leaving space for reflection, that can help just overall turn down the dial on the level of drama that somebody would anticipate a conversation like this has. And one really interesting concept and something that I definitely think can work in this sort of environment is this idea of YAND. And I got this idea from a nonprofit called Reset, where it's basically using this idea of yes and in a conversation in order to create space and allow you to build on people's ideas instead of shutting them down, which is something that saying no or but can do. So think about how the word but in a conversation like that can feel like friction, can feel like conflict. So if an employee says something like, well, I didn't know that was my responsibility, some people might say, but I told you that. Instead of creating this hostility of this dynamic where it's almost binary, like it's either what they experience, their reality, and what you experience and your reality, you can use yes and. So if they're saying, I didn't know that was my responsibility, you could say yes, and there obviously was a disconnect between our expectations because you were actually giving this information during onboarding. Do you see how that situation, which literally I just made up right now, already creates more space for a more productive conversation as opposed to shutting someone down, as opposed to pointing a finger, and just overall creating an environment of hostility. So if you feel like a conversation is ever getting tense, if you feel like you're just getting uncomfortable, remember YAND. Yes, and. So let's go over 3 practical steps around how to navigate a tough conversation like this. The first step is start with context and invite perspective. Remember what I told you about the fact that we are leading with curiosity. So we want to make sure that we have the full scope, we have the full picture here. So this step will likely involve bringing up the issue at hand and then inviting their perspective. And remember, you want to create some space here, right? You want to ask them, how are you seeing this? And if you see that somebody is obviously very uncomfortable, you can ask them what's coming up for them, right? They might be feeling uncomfortable because you don't have all of the facts, right? It feels like they're being blamed and that's not how something went down. So you want that information and you want them to share their perspective. The second step is to share the impact. Again, we're here to resolve an issue, right? So we need to address why the things that happened led to an issue, led to a problem. And when you are sharing the impact, I would encourage you to be very, very clear here. Be very, very transparent, as you should be throughout the whole conversation. But be explicit with what the impact is. Hey, you know, when we drop the ball on X, that means clients don't have a good experience. And honestly, without our clients having a good experience, we do not get referrals and they are less likely to return to us. This would also be a great place for you to bring in metrics or key performance indicators. Ideally, if you're bringing somebody into your business, they are doing work that directly impacts a specific KPI. So again, let's say they were doing something around onboarding or the client experience. You are able to reference metrics like your customer return rate or your revenue or, you know, your referral revenue. These are all metrics that somebody might be impacting when they are dealing with aspects around client onboarding or client management. And the third step is actually to align on next steps together. So come into the conversation with specific things in mind, right? Like you should have a pretty good idea of what next steps should look like. I would recommend you just open up that part of the conversation by saying something like, let's talk about how we can move forward from this. And then you outline, you know, what you think next steps would be suitable, but also invite their input on this as well. Invite their perspective on it. You know, maybe there's something that they know that they can do in order to achieve better outcomes for next time. So I really like that because it gives somebody ownership around their development and it gives them the opportunity to do better, and it also gives them the opportunity to communicate their needs. A couple of tips. As I've already mentioned, you want to make sure you stay calm and stay grounded throughout this conversation. If you're having trouble doing that, again, create those pockets within the conversation where there's some space and there's less friction by using statements like yes and, as opposed to just shutting down communication by using statements like no, or creating an environment of friction or potential hostility when you're constantly saying but. The other thing is to avoid blaming language and statements, because you know whose responsibility all of this is? Yours. You're the CEO, you're the business owner. It all rests on your shoulders at the end of the day, regardless of an individual's one actions. So drop the ego and drop the blame game. And remember to focus on solutions and not just the problem. Yes, understanding what happened, understanding the gaps is important in order to rectify and work towards the solution, but you cannot just stay stuck on the problem. And to emphasize, another tip, which I already mentioned earlier on, is you want to be direct. Do not sugarcoat the issue here. You know, be clear in your communication in order to achieve a better situation for everybody. Remember, having these tough conversations is ultimately what drives better performance in your business and leads to better outcomes, which lead to better revenue, which leads to more money for everybody involved in the business. This is about sharpening your skills as a CEO and as a leader and showing up as the sort of leader that people would want to follow. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button down below and don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.